A very good evening, friends. Today we are going to discuss the previous year questions on the topic that we have discussed in the last eight sessions of paper 2, that is theory of international relations. This is Sunday. I don't want to disturb you with much more topics or anything, but I just wanted to give a brief idea on how we can apply whatever we have read so far by looking at the previous year questions and how far our series is going to help you in answering the previous year questions. So this is just an incitement, or it will be just like an insightful observations on how we can apply our approaches or our way of thinking to the previous year questions. I will link I am taking the past questions of UPSC, particularly from the syllabus that we have done so far, that is the theories of international relations. That is what we did. We have discussed all the theories. Yes, then we will be applying that in this session for a while. It won't take much time also. So this is we are doing it from 2020 to 2014. From the official site, I have taken the previous year questions. So you can be quite sure about the questions that I am discussing and how far the authenticity of the questions. So it could be quite authoritative also as far as the questions is concerned and as far as our discussion is considered. So this is the syllabus pattern that we have read so far. That is the approaches to the study of international relations. I think that you have seen my past 8 videos where I have done the idealist approach, which is also called as the liberal approach, and the sub-schools in liberalism, such as various 6 sub-schools in neoliberalism. Then there is realist phase, classical realism and neo-realism. In neo-realism, again, we have two types, that is called defensive realism and offensive realism. And as we move further in realism, we have seen what is called the subaltern realism also of Muhammad Ayub. So these are the various approaches in neo-realism also. And then in the Marxist approach, we have seen in detail about the Marxist approach, about each and everything in Marxism. The neo-classical Marxism and the neo-Marxism. In classical Marxism, we have seen the theory of dependence, of interdependence, the development of underdevelopment. And we have also seen the world systems approach of Mr. Immanuel Wallerstein. And then we have seen the critical schools like the Frankfurt School, and we have also seen Gramscian model of Marxism approach towards the international relations. And in the functionalist approach, they have given it a separate department, but as far as this functionalism goes, you can link this functionalism here. We have read this functionalist approach when we are discussing the functionalist theories such as piece by pieces model, piece by pieces, spillover effects, and then there is one more concept that we discussed, that is functional linkages approach. The persons who have played vital role here is David Mitrani, and we have also seen the neo-functionalist approach that has emerged with Ernest Haas, right? These are the thinkers that we have seen. So functionalist approach is one type of idealist school. Systems theory, here there will be certain clarification that I wanted to give. Systems theory is one approach which can be considered as world systems approach of Marxism, or again world systems theory is one approach here. The second approach is, there is one man called Martin Kepler system, where he has defined the international relations into 10 systems, ranging from balance of power model to, he has said that unit veto systems. Almost he gives the entire the entire classification of international system was done by Martin Kepler into 10 things. That is one sub theme that I have not discussed, but looking at the previous questions, it appeared to me that it is not that important from perspective of films. But as far as systems theory is concerned, yes, I have discussed the systems theory of world systems theory. When I was discussing, I said system is anything which have elements and there will be a content pattern of interaction. So we discussed this very clearly in Marxist approach. So I think this is more than enough. And whenever this systems theory, as far as the remaining part of systems theory is considered, maybe Martin Kepler's approach, I would be discussing this when I deal the David Easton's model of systems analysis. We have these thinkers, they belong to behavioralist approach. in international relation. And the other schools, the first to last schools, they are like traditional schools. What is a traditional school? Traditional schools means they talk about philosophy, they talk about history, they talk about legal institutions, but these persons they talk about scientific approach. That is why we call systemic approach or scientific approach. Systems approach is a scientific approach that we have to see. That the remaining part, that is Martin Kepler system, I'll tell you when I was dealing uh, Kaplan system. When I was dealing this David Easton's model, we have a separate topic called David Easton behavioral approach towards the comparative politics or towards political theory. Right? This is what the syllabus is. This is what we discussed so far. Now I just wanted to look at the previous year questions from these sections, and I wanted to make sure how we can link. Why I wanted to tell you one thing very clearly, how we can link the theoretical aspect to the application part whenever we are reading, how we can apply to the questions. We look at some of the questions that is from 2020 to 2014. I'll go to previous year questions folder. Here I have not made the slides particularly because I just wanted to take the question papers of UPSC itself rather than segregating here, because then that gives the real feel that we are in the examination hall. So this is what I wanted to make. I'll just show you what are the things here. Now let us go to this theory that is called, now consider this. This is Civil Services Mains 2020, right? Civil Services Mains 2020. We look at the previous year questions here. Paper 2, this is paper 2. Paper 2 question paper, and we know this is what we have written in 2020. Let us look at the previous year questions. Now, if you look at the previous year questions, let me erase what I have written previously. Now look at the questions, So there is one question which is related to the topic. If you look at discuss first question, A, discuss about the subject matter of comparative politics. This is first syllabus point in paper 2. Analyze the contribution of liberal democratic principles in democratization of Indian polity. This is again comparative politics. As the increased participation of the underprivileged in the political process. These three belongs to comparative politics that we have to discuss. I have not started. I am just picking up the questions which we can link to the theories that we have read so far. Now, if you look at the question 1D, look at this. Critically examine the impact of the process of globalization from the perspective of countries of the global south. So they are asking impact of globalization from the perspective of global south. See, there is one discussion or there is one topic called globalization separately in comparative politics that we will be dealing. But as far as with the knowledge that we gained, how we can approach this question from the basic theoretical aspect is, see, globalization is can be seen from realist perspective, right? Sorry, it can be seen from liberal perspective. How? Globalization from the liberal school, that is economic interdependence school, what they say, by establishing economic linkages, then we can ensure that nations progress and we can avoid war. So they see globalization in a positive perspective. That is from the view of liberals, particularly the economic liberals like Thomas Friedman. They suggested that globalization has created a good impact on the global south. But a critical analysis of globalization at the international level was done by Marxism, that we have seen, because the focus of Marxist theories at the international level is operation of capitalism at the global level. Operation of capitalism at the global level is called globalization, right? So they have said that from the countries, from the perspective of the countries of global south, if we look at globalization, then definitely we can bring Marxism here and say, as per the classical Marxists, or as per the world system approach of Wallerstein, what they say, global southern countries are also known as the peripheral countries, where peripheral countries were exploited in globalization. So the causes of poverty today in the global south, as per A.G. Frank and Samir Amin, remember the names I said while I was discussing the theoretical model of Marxism. As per them, they said that global south has become poor and it has been continuously exploited because of the global northern countries. So globalization is one phenomena where the dominance of certain classes, that is the core classes, that the core states, is continuing in the global south. So basically what I am telling, the entire answer might not be this, because this is a separate topic called globalization, but one perspective can be, we can link, when they are asking about from the global south, we cannot tell our approach. Okay, I am thinking that global south is in this way, or my friend is thinking in this way. No, we have to substantiate our answers from the point of the thinkers or the theoretical aspect. So what are the theories? We have certain theories, right, that we read. Now that is just application. As per Marxism, global south has been deteriorated or exploited. The thinkers like A.G. Frank, Amir Samin has substantiated, and they said that the neo-colonialism is still present and it is still exploited in the form of financial capitalism or debt trapped. Then you can give certain examples. But however, if we look from the perspective of realism and liberalism, thinkers like Thomas Friedman has said that globalization has created a positive impact on the global south because of the decimation of technology, because of the decimation of capital. These power countries were brought out of poverty. So this would be the perspective, right? This would be the analysis on which we can counter the arguments and we can recounter the arguments. So that is what the approach is. Here the question is not directly, this is application part. That is what I said. Theories are applications. The rest of the syllabus will be applications of the theories. And that is the reason why I took to deal the first chapter in that way. Exclusively the first chapter of theories. Now if you look at the next question, let us look at the next question. This is a direct question. What are the core assumptions of idealism as an approach to the international relations, explaining its continuing relevance in peace building? This is what the liberal school is, right? Classical liberals are very called as utopians or ideals. How can we start this? What are the core assumptions of idealism? The core assumptions of idealism are similar to realists. What they assume that this I discussed when I was discussing liberalism. International order is in anarchical order. States are in anarchy. States are the ultimate authorities. As there is no controlling authority at the centralized authority, states are at the helm of anarchy. So in order to control, anarchy is the state of international politics. In order to control anarchy, what is required? Security of the nations is required. And apart from security, they also believe in the form of peace and prosperity that we discussed. And in order to have this collective security, or to have this national security, then definitely we should bring the institutions, and then you can discuss about the 6 sub schools that we discussed: economic interdependence school, dependency, democratic peace theories. You can also discuss about the first school called development of institutions like League of Nations, like UNO. So these are all the ideals, that the core assumptions. What are the core assumptions? They said that states are the ultimate actors. Yes, they believe that states are the ultimate actors. There exists anarchy in the state, and how this anarchy can be prevented, not just by balance of power. You have to have collective security. This is a term that they use. What is collective security? You engage into international organizations through cooperation rather than conflict. You can resolve the disputes. And one more core assumption is, not only states are the key actors. Unlike realists, they believe that apart from states, there are certain other organizations. So this is not state centric alone. They have considered other actors in international relations. The actors may be the NGOs or transnational companies or multinational companies who are operating at the global level. So these are the core assumptions. And what is the relevance of peace building? You can substantiate with the answers that I said. They focused on collective security. If you look at after the establishment of United Nations Organization, which was a result of the neoclassical liberal approach, many nations, though there existed a continuous struggle among the nations, still they restricted from going into waging conventional wars or waging face-to-face wars. So this can be given as a credit to the so-called the institutions which these persons has played, and they are playing a very relevant role. Up to this point, we can write on how to counter the argument that we have written. Not our counter, we will counter from the perspective of realism. How we can counter? As per John Mearsheimer, you can counter that the declining role of institutions after the COVID-19 pandemic or before the COVID-19 pandemic, and the emergence of the right-wing governments across the nations, starting from Donald Trump to Narendra Modi. So these can be seen on the nation's first policies, that is America's first policy, India's first policy, China's first policy, shows that the tendency of the cooperation is declining, whereas the cooperation of national security is increasing. You can take this approach. So still there exists a challenge to the international peace. So idealism as such has not given a clear-cut idea, or has been in a continuous changing format. However, again, you can counter your arguments telling that though there are certain deficiencies in the international world system, but at least this system is able to provide certain guarantee that the worlds are not going to war. So this is how we can write the criticism from one school. Because remember, in international relations, we have idealism, we have realism and Marxism. One fellow will be countering the other fellow, and then there is feminism. They will be arguing among themselves. So we don't need to write our assumptions. If you are supporting idealism, then if you want to write criticism of idealism, then definitely the criticism comes from the realism, the criticism comes from Marxism, the criticism comes from feminism, right? If you want to support feminism, you can support. At the same time, there will be criticisms from the other schools. No need to write your criticism. You can use the thinkers that we have discussed. As per this thinker, they approach it this way. So you can substantiate. So how should be our answer? We'll write the basic assumptions, and we will see what are the criticisms about that assumptions and what are the positives in that assumptions through these thinkers. We are not going to write from our perspective, that is not from Dhananjay Reddy's perspective or some other's perspective here. We'll be writing from the perspective of the thinkers. So this is a direct question. Now see, if we have come across the terms, this would have been very easy. And the rest of the things, yes, explain the concept of balance of power. We should come to this topic called balance of power. That would be the next topic in our discussion from tomorrow. But remember here, explain the concept of balance power. What are the various techniques of maintaining balance of power? This is direct question related to balance of power. Again, like globalization that discussed, that is a separate topic here. But how far can we substantiate our answer as far as balance of power? If you remember, balance of power, when we are discussing balance of power, was the theory propounded by the realist, and balance of power was given much focus by the offensive realists rather than the defensive realists. So you can use the terms of Morgenthau, you can use about E.H. Carr, you can say about John Mearsheimer. So we can discuss about the balance of power is a realistic concept of the understanding of international relations. If you want to counter balance of power, then again the counter comes from the liberal school, where they say that power is not essential, but what is required is, apart from power, you should have security maximization of defensive realists like Kenneth Walls or liberals, saying that not only peace, security is important, peace and prosperity is also important. So you can counter that. But the question, remember, this is speaking about various techniques. These techniques we should discuss when we are discussing balance of power. But as far as balance of power, concept of balance of power goes, we have already written, or we have already done substantial portion of balance of power in our discussions. So what my point is, at least in this question, you will be able to write 1 or 2 points from the theoretical perspective. You can give your assumptions based on the theory that we read so far. So this is how we are going to utilize, or this is what the utility of the subject that we have done. So I wanted to show what is the utility of what we have discussed so far. Next, enumerate the challenges on the operation. Yes, again, UN Charter is a separate topic, but still we can use certain aspects here that we read. The UN Charter, how from the liberal perspective, UN Charters are acting as a very good source to increase cooperation across the countries, but they are asking the challenges. So challenges in the operations, yes, we write some certain challenges of UN Charter. We'll see that challenges when we are discussing UNO, but if there are still challenges, we will not be telling challenges plainly like a generalistic answer. We will be writing that UN Charter has challenges from the perspective of Marxism, because Marxists believe that these institutions are made to serve certain classes, that is the global north countries, and they are making global south very, very poor, or the peripheral countries into poor. So UN Charter is getting challenged from the global south as per Marxist approach. So we can link Marxism here and say that, okay, whatever the challenges that they are existing because of, from the theoretical model of Marxism. But from liberal Marxism, from the liberal perspective, we can say that yes, UN Charter has played a very crucial role in establishing peace and security across the countries. You can give the latest examples also that we will be discussing in the coming days. But again, I am telling you how we can utilize the point that we have discussed so far. Critically analyze the implications of Sino-American strategy rivalry for the South and Southeast Asian regions. Now, if you look at China-America strategic rivalry, how can we look at critically analyze? They are asking us to critically analyze. We cannot critically analyze from our perspective. We can critically analyze only from the perspective of schools of international politics, because they are like Bible, they are like Quran, they are like Bhagavad Gita. Whatever they said, we will be looking from their perspective, from the eyes of the scholars, or from the eyes of the theories, or from the eyes of the schools, rather than from our own eyes. See, if they are asking a question like this, critically analyze the implications of, say, American strategic rivalry in South and Southeast Asia, then how can we discuss this? We can look this from the perspective of realism, really say that if you look from the realist eyes, why Sino-America strategic rivalry exists. This is because of hegemony. When one country is challenging the hegemony of other country, then definitely the power maximization takes place, as per John Mearsheimer. So you can see that power maximization is what it is causing to Sino-American rivalry. And then you can also use then we can also use Sino-American strategy from the perspective of the so-called John Mearsheimer bandwagoning concept. I discussed this bandwagoning and buck passing. If you look at America involving India in the in the South Pacific Ocean, then definitely South Chinese Ocean or South Pacific Ocean, then definitely this can be seen as buck passing. And whatever the countries who are aligning with China, you can consider as bandwagoning models. So you can use these terms, bandwagoning of the countries, and America's approach here in the form of towards India is like buck passing. As buck passing is not working, it is trying to establish its hegemony, or it is trying to balance its power with the help of Quad strategic group. Then this is the perspective, right? This I didn't say this. This was said by John Mearsheimer. So we will tell, as per John Mearsheimer, it is going to be a very good approach. Or this is not good approach as per John Mearsheimer. This is what the thing is going on. But if you look at liberals, how liberals said that as there is no order, like if you look at this from the liberal perspective, why this strategic rivalry exists, because there is no institution to resolve these disputes at the regional level. So you can take the model of Ernest Haas that we discussed, functional specialization, right? In the Ernest Haas you can take, or David Mitrani you can take. David Mitrani called for confederation of the global levels, and Ernest Haas said that confederation of the regional level. So if you remember that theme that we discussed, then definitely you can apply here and say that in order to contain this strategy or rivalry, definitely you can invoke Ernest Haas model of forming a loose or regional confederation where we can resolve the disputes through strategic dialogue. So this can be seen in this perspective, right? I am telling you again, the answer has certain other dimensions, not just the liberal dimensions or realist dimensions, because whenever we are reading about China, or whenever we are reading about America, we will be coming about these rivalries that exist in the state. But as they are asking us to critically analyze, they are not asking someone, but we are the persons who have to critically analyze. That doesn't mean that we are giving our assumptions there. We are giving the assumptions of these thinkers. That is what the point is. And we will substantiate with whatever the examples we can substantiate with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, or the Quad principle of America, pivot to Asia's doctrine of America. So this could be the substantiation points. Again, how substantiation? From the perspective of thinkers, right? You will get the details there, but what I am telling, how to use our subject here, that is what my discussion is. Discuss the ways to strengthen NAM to enable to address the changing concerns. NAM can be seen, non-alignment movement. This can be seen from the perspective of Marxism, because non-alignment movement of the many countries are global south countries. How to strengthen them global south countries? Then automatically you should have that you should stop exploitation of some semi-peripherals over the peripheries. So we can bring one perspective from Marxist approach. Or you can also say that through a constant interaction from the perspective of liberals, like institutions has to be strengthened, democratic peace theories has to be promoted, economic interlinkages has to be promoted among the NAM countries, then definitely they are going to strengthen from these points of view. But again, if you look from the realist perspective of view, until and unless the structure of the national security or international order is changed, there is no going to be a peaceful guarantee. Or in order to make NAM to work efficiently, then definitely you should have some structural changes across the region or across the globe. So you can tell that from that perspective. That is one point or 2 points you can write in this answer again from the perspectives. But again, you have a separate topic called NAM where you will be reading about other topics, right? Critically, I evaluate the role of United States of America in the World Trade Organization's dispute settlement mechanism and its implications for the future of WTO. Now, whenever they are asking you to critically evaluate, critically analyze, you cannot do from the assumptions that I have or that we have or that we read in the newspaper or that we read in the current affairs PT 365 books. No, we cannot analyze that from them. So again, I am telling we can evaluate only from the perspective of idealist thinkers or the liberal thinkers or realist thinkers and Marxist thinkers and then feminist thinkers. So you can say what are the challenges in WTO as of now. This we will discuss when we are discussing WTO, the new international economic order. But again, in order to critically analyze, these are the basic themes on which you can analyze. I think you are getting the point. What is the significance of NEO? NEO is an new international economic order. Significance, what is the significance and what are the objectives? The significance can be seen from the perspective of realism again, from the perspective of liberalism again, and from the perspective of Marxism again. From the perspective of liberalism, NEO is acting as new international economic order, is acting as strengthening of the relations or strengthening of the institutions across the globe, and it is focusing on re-strengthening of certain institutions in the global south, as was said by Marxists, because Marxists considered that global south is exploited. As a result, global south is started or socialistic pattern of international relations have been emerging, and that is the reason why new international economic order has been brought into picture. So you can bring Marxist theory of international world order, saying that the world order, existing world order, is balanced towards the global south as global north are the core countries. As a result, the global southern countries, they are demanding for equality, for justice. You can bring the term of justice, where they is not bothered about prosperity alone, but they are bothered about justice. Justice means fair treatment of each and every state of the international economic order. So international economic order is an attempt to bring rationality in the, or to attempt to bring justice to the global order. So you can tell from the perspective. So this is the significance. The significance is emerging. You can write in your conclusion that at least you, in the conclusion you can write these scholars like the neo-realists, sorry, not neo-realists, Marxists, and then you can say just like A.G. Frank and Samir Amin, the Marxists, who said that neo-international economic order can be seen as a balancing to the exploitation that has been causing by the global north. Or you can also say that, as per Emmanuel Wallerstein, that the core countries are being at the exploitative stage, and they are exploiting constantly the global south. In order to counter this, the global south has demanded a new international economic order where they are focusing not just on world trade, World Bank or IMF or United Nations organizations, but they are also coming up with certain institutions like Asian Investment, AIIB, Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank, or the BRICS Bank, or the New Development Bank, that has been emerging. These are the trends in new international economic order, right? That we will discuss. But theoretical perspective is this. Again, I am telling, in every question of paper 2, you can use this theoretical perspective. That is what my assumption, or that is what my intention is here. I just wanted to show in each and every question how you can utilize the applications, that 4 principles are the 8 classes that I have said, how we can come and apply, and then we can substantiate our answers. Discuss the significance of the urgency of United Nations Security Council's reforms. Yes, United Nations Security Councils, how we can say reforms are being demanded by the global southern countries, again like India, Brazil, China. Why they are demanding? They are demanding because, again, United Nations Security Council is favoring only the global north countries, or few countries. Sorry, here I said United Nations Security Council. China is not demanding, because, but other countries like India, Brazil, Australia, they are demanding for United Security Council, for seats in the United Security Council. This is again in order to justify the to justify the injustice, or to justify the demands of the global southern countries like India, Latin American countries, or you can go for Oceanian countries, where they were constantly struggling to remove poverty and to increase fairness in the system. So you can bring that perspective again here. No need to write entire answer or entire paper just from the perspective of this, but at least one point here and there you can use elaboratively, or you can quote this. Again, Asian, if you look from the concept of functionalist approach that I said, right? Functionalist approach. What is this Asian functionalist approach? I said that functionalism approach is also known as a regional theory of regional interdependence. Uh, there we read, about David Mitran's Global Federation, or Ernest Haas Regional Federation. ASEAN can be considered as one such type of regional federation where Asian countries were promoted in order to discuss among themselves, and it is acting as a platform for discussion. So this can be considered from the perspective of neo-functionalist approach, where Asian countries, the global trading partners, not just governments, but the trading partners are involved here. So you can look from the perspective of Asian as an institution from liberal perspective. You can look from the functionalist perspective, particularly to answer this question. Next, United Nations framework and climate change. Then again, you can write it from the perspective of not just, this is not a typical GS answer that we write for environment. No, this can be looked again from the perspectives of views of international relations, like the thinkers, like UNFCCC is a platform where people discuss about the emerging global concerns like terrorism, environment, global refugee crisis. So United Nations framework is a platform where again you can write Woodrow Wilson's model of platform usages of platform usages of these platforms, global platforms, and then you can write about Woodrow Wilson, you can write about Roosevelt. You can write about these institutions, because these are the institutions which are playing a vital role, particularly, right? Again, I'm telling the entire answer for the 15 markers. We will not be rotating around that. We will be writing about UNFCCC also, but one or two points will be substantiating from the thinkers. One or two points. So everything. So this is how the paper 1 section A is. If you look at every question, I applied the thinkers. This is 2020 paper. I just applied for each and every question in this. I applied for every question. The reason why I wanted to show here is that I just wanted to make sure that the utility of the past 8 videos that I made, it has a very great utility, because question paper is about asking about our critical analysis, our evaluation. If you want to evaluate, we can not evaluate out of from the sky. You cannot evaluate from the perspective of layman. You have to evaluate from the perspective of thinkers. We have to evaluate from the perspective of schools. That is the reason why I said how we can approach in each and every question. I said we can approach, you give me any question in paper 2, I can link that with the thinkers, right? This is what I said. Again, entire answer might not be about the thinkers only. Every answer has its own set of requirements. Say for example, United Nations, UNFCCC, it has its set. But in order to evaluate that, we will be looking from the perspective of these 4 or 5 thinkers: feminist thinkers, realist thinkers, liberal thinkers, or the Marxist thinkers. That is what the point is. I think you got the point here. So this is what I wanted to tell. The utility is very, very high. Entire paper is done if you are done with this thinkers or theories of international politics. So you have to write, or we have to write through this perspective only. Otherwise, there is a very, very less chance of getting selected into mains. It's getting selected. I have written very generalistic answers in 2020, but I couldn't clear prelims. I thought that this is one area where I lagged. I developed this approach recently. Okay, where I did wrong. So this is how we can do it. If we are focusing, then definitely we can do it in this way, right? So this is what 2020 paper is considered, and then I'll just show you 2019 paper. and how this paper can be discussed from the perspective of, see, in the last paper, in the 2020 paper, there is one question which was asked directly from the question. That is, if you look, there is one direct question from the topic that we read. What is the direct question that we read? This one. What are the core assumptions? This I read directly. So this was a direct question. So there is one direct question, at least for one 10 marker, or at least for 15 marker, there is one direct question from the topic that we prepared. But the application is found in each and every question. That is what I wanted to say. Right? Now we will look, the same thing can be applied here also. You can apply the thinkers. See, remember again, what are the thinkers that we read? The liberal school, the realist school, the Marxist school, the feminist school. Right? If you just remember this, in the light of this, you can analyze every question. Nuclear deterrence theory. How you can analyze nuclear deterrence theory from the realist perspective? They said that balance of power is very important. Go for power maximization. So nuclear power is one way which realists support, especially John Mearsheimer supports it. And they said that nuclear power can act as a deter, or it can act as deterrence power to the nation. It can deter the enemy from attacking you or the other country from attacking you. So realist perspective, they say that, but liberals believe that no, this, but you can counter again from the approach of Kenneth Walls, the realist who said defensive realist, not offensive realist. Offensive realists say that okay, you go for nuclear deterrence, but Kenneth Wall says that as we go on expanding power maximization, then it would be counterproductive because it forms counter alliances, and then you can substantiate in this way. See, every question there is certain point of applying. If you give me any question, NAM can be seen as organizations again, liberal organizations, liberal institutions perspective, if you want. Hmm? Prominence of USA in the United Nations funding. Again, you can say that USA, the role has been, United Nations has been shifted or tilted towards certain Western countries rather than global Northern countries from the Marxist perspective. You can say that one also. Again, BIMSTEC is an organization like functional specialization of David Mithrani or Ernest Haas that we discussed, right? So functional specialization, neo-functionalism approach, you can write this answer also. Again, not entire answer, but one or two answers, one or two questions, right? ICJ, again ICJ, you can apply. ICJ is one platform where you can resolve the disputes. That is what we discussed. When we have institutions, people or states do not prefer to go to war, rather they are going to have a peaceful arbitration techniques, and this arbitration is going to resolve the disputes among the states. That is the context. Now you look this question. This is a direct question for 20 marker. Explain the relevance of Marxist approach in the context of globalization. Right, in the context of globalization, we read it in very clearly. Here you can apply what is globalization. You can write about globalization phenomena and how Marxists see globalization. I said that the Marxist focus of international relations is entirely on the operation of capitalism at the highest level. Operation of capitalism at the highest level, as per Marxists, it is known as globalization. And globalization is a tool which is developed by the core countries to exploit the poorer countries or the peripheral countries. Globalization is the response, or is the factor which is playing a very vital role in making the richer countries richer and poorer countries poorer. It is what has made the poverty in global south is due to this globalization phenomena. Again, you can counter this argument. How you can counter? You can also say this: globalization is a capitalist tendency, like capitalism, as capitalism is inherently contradictory to itself. You can use the principle inherently it is contradictory to itself, like Marxism. Marxists believe that capitalism is inherently contradictory to itself, so it has its end. So the global deglobalization that is taking place at the global level today, before COVID-19 or after COVID-19, every nation is shutting their doors for outside world. These can be seen as anti-globalization phenomena that has started. So Marxism phenomena has clearly explained the globalization from the view of global south, from the view of global north. This is how you can substantiate the answer. And again, you can counter Marxist approach by telling that okay, no, realists, liberals, particularly liberals, said that globalization is very responsible, is very very helpful for the global south countries, because it is globalization which has played a very crucial role in analyzing or in making the phenomena, or in making the poorer countries to get better off. You can also counter Marxist approach from the perspective of the neo-Marxist approach or the critical schools, which says that uh, globalization is not just in the economic phenomena, but you can also see it in the cultural domination, in the ideological domination. So if some countries like the Western countries, if they are able to continue their capitalism mode in the form of globalization, then it could not be seen only from the perspective of economy, but it has to be seen from the perspective of cultural and ideological basis also. It is through globalization as such is not limited to the economic term. It is all encompassing terms, including polity, including ideologies, including the societies. So globalization is present everywhere, and you can end with the statement of global village. Today, global villages are found where the interactions have been very, very, very specific, or very, very highly interactive, and this is all because of you can say from the perspective of uh, neo-Marxist approach or the critical Marxist approach. See how we can use the theorem, right? So this is what I said, you can apply. So this is one direct question from the Marxist screen from Global Approach 20 marker in 2019. Now let us look at 2018 version. In 2018, again I am telling you, in every question you can apply. I just showed in 2020 paper how you can apply. Now let us look at the exclusive question that has been asked from the topics. Now there is one question which was asked in 2018. This is bring out the major differences between classical realism of Hans Morgenthau and neo-realism of Kenneth Walls. This again we discussed in exclusively, right? I think you might be getting a point now. I discussed classical realism of Hans de Morgenthau. Remember, Hans de Morgenthau is considered as the father of classical realism, or the father of realism as such. And then the six unique principles that this man said. And then this was countered by the neo-realists, saying that these realists, classical realists, focused on unit level approach, or the human based approach. Rather, we have to study the structure of the international relations in order to understand the relations that exist at the politics of the international level. Then Kenneth Walls has given a scientific analysis. He said that rather than going on focusing on the means, that is the unit level approach, you have to consider the sectoral approach. So that is what structural approach, that is what the major difference is. But they believe in one more term, that is, both believe that states are the actors in the international relations. As states are the hegemonic actors, they are sovereign of the actors. There is no centralizing authority. As such, there is anarchy in the system. If there is anarchy in the system, then you should have power in order to counter the or in order to protect your security or counter the other country who is trying to destabilize your country. So these are the four basic assumptions that both realists agree, that is neo-realists agree, classical realists agree. But how much power one should have, this is the differentiation which is done between the classical liberals and the defensive realists. Particularly Hans Morgenthau says that you should have enough power to deter, or maximum power to deter. So as per Hans Morgenthau, states are power maximizers. But Kenneth Walls differs here. Kenneth Walls says that states are security maximizers. They want security, not power. Hence, as per Hans J. Morgenthau, power has dual character. That is, power is the means and power is the end. But Kenneth Walls said that power is just a means, but the ends are security of the country. So they differ here. So they say that Hans J. Morgenthau advises that there is no role of ideology. Ideologies are just a tool to cover up the intentions. But Kenneth Wall says that no, they are not tools. The only interest of the countries are collective, is security of the country. So we should have minimum power. So the major difference occurs at on how they studied the international system. That is the first difference. Classical realists studies at the unit level, and these fellows, they studied at the structural level, neo-realists particularly. And then how much amount of power? For classical realists, they say that maximum amount of power, or power is the end, but for Kenneth Walls, security is the end. So this is the major difference, and you can write what are the other features. We discussed it very clearly in our discussion. So this is again a 10 marker that we can write very easily. See again, every question trumps America's first. You cannot read this or you cannot come out to answer these questions if you read the basic trivial notes, because in notes they will not give. Whichever institution you are going and taking coaching, or whichever institution you are writing the test series, this they will not ask direct questions. UPSC makes the questions in this way, which are very dynamic and which requires the application, right? That is what I wanted to say. Unlike the paper one, if you look at paper one, they directly ask John Rawls theory of justice. They ask philosopher king of Plato, democracy. They will ask direct questions. But in paper two, particularly the topic is very dynamic. We have to develop, that analyzation skills. You have to develop that interlinking capability. How you can link intercapability by the approach of international theory. You should understand the theory. The moment you understand the theory, then application part comes very easy. Again, I'll show you one more example. This is America's first and Chinese dream of world politics. Tell me one source where you can come across this or this question to answer. Tell me one source in the market. No source in the market will be sufficient to answer this question. Consequences of America's first and Chinese dream of world politics. No, you can write the consequences only from the perspective of realism, liberalism, Marxism, feminism. How can you write consequences? How you can write? As per liberals, this tendency that America's first or Chinese dream makes the countries to be thinking independently, and they act as security dilemma for the country. They increase the security dilemma. As a result, they lead to instability of the global world order, because every state again starts to think about themselves rather than cooperating. There will be conflicts in the international level. As a result, power maximization takes place as per the liberals. This is a deglobalization tendency. Whereas if you look from the realist perspective, you can say that this is one tendency where countries are they are maximizing their power internally, and they wanted to establish their hegemony so that they can ensure their national interest as far as the realist perspective is considered. So the consequences are going to be it has both consequences. At the international level, if you look from the perspective of realists, it is going to have the consequence of ensuring the national security of particular nations, that is America and China. But if you look from the liberal perspective, then the consequences change. How they change? They are going to destabilize the global order. Anarchy is going to increase. The role of multinational authorities are going to get decreased. Right? How can you write Marxism? From the Marxism perspective, again, you can write America's first policy, China's dream. These are about the class dominant perspectives. The countries of the global south, that is the peripheral countries or semi-peripheral countries, they started realizing that they are being exploited. As a result, they are having this model of Chinese dream. This is deglobalization tendency as per Marxist. Right, this is how you can write. Discuss the consequences. The consequences you cannot write just by studying the books. You have to analyze from the perspective of the thinkers, from the perspective of theory. That is what my point is. Again, some feel multinational corporations are vital for the new road for economic growth, whereas others feel they perpetuate underdevelopment. Who are those who feel? Some feel that MNCs are vital for the economic growth. Some feel that vital for economic growth. Who are those who feel that they are vital? Obviously, they are liberals who feel, not me, who feels that okay, MNCs are vital road of development. Okay, I think that, but I cannot say that it is my perspective. Dhananjay Reddy is going to think in this way. That is why it is going to help. No, this is not my perspective or some other institute's perspective. Who are those who feel that it is vital road for economic growth? They are liberals who think liberal perspective. And who is this who are going to think that it is going to perpetuate underdevelopment? Obviously, these are going to be the Marxists, right? Some feel. Who are those? Others, Marxists. Here, realists or liberals. So that is what I wanted to say. See the utility. For every question, you have the utility, the topic that we discussed. Again, international environmental politics, North-South divide. The debate between North and South exists in Marxism. And Marxism is a school which has come out with the terms like North and South, global North and global South. So if you look from the perspective, you can write this answer again from Marxist perspective of international relations. See, I have shown you how the questions are being asked. How can we apply the knowledge of our base to the this, right? Then I'll just quickly go through 2017 paper. I'm not going to, I think you have got clarity on how to apply each and every question from the perspective of, particularly from the perspective of thinkers. But now what I am going to discuss is the 2017 paper. I will just discuss the questions that were asked in this question directly from the our discussion. 2A, there is one question which was asked for 20 marks. Is realist the best method to understand international relations, examined in the context of classical realism? We have read the theory, right? Realism, they are asking us, is realist approach the best method to understand international relations? Yes, realists say it is the best method, whereas liberals say that no, this is not the best method. You can quote Francis Fukuyama, who said that after globalization has started, you can bring this debate called neo debate, where Francis Fukuyama said that liberalism has, in his book called The End of History of Humankind, he said that liberalism is the ultimate school, or the school which has given every solution, or every solution for the war in international relations. So realist approach, at times, yes, you can counter this argument from liberals perspective. You can support this from realist thinkers like Kenneth Walls, or from particularly from John Mearsheimer. In the context of classical realism, if you look at context of classical realism, again you have to bring those two persons called E.H. Carr and Hans-Joachim Morgenthau. If you are bringing those two persons, and then definitely if you look at the global world order, yes, to some extent that what classical liberals have said, today the system is continuing in that way, in that way, because the deglobalization tendencies that are happening across the countries, excuse me, the deglobalization tendencies which are happening across the countries, these can be seen as a model where realism is again gaining its prominence. However, in international relations, there is no such thing called one thing or one thinker who says that everything is applicable to them, because some thinkers like Marxism say that they are creating certain imbalances. Some feminists, particularly feminists, say that they have neglected the role of women in the international politics. As a result, if you look at the approaches of environmental politics at the global level, or women issues at the global level, or the children issues at the global level, these are all because classical realism has neglected these schools. So you can counter these argument like, no, this is not the best way to understand the international relations. Again, you can counter, yes, to some extent it is solving the problem, but you should have an interdisciplinary approach where you will take certain functions of liberalism, certain functions of realism, and you can also take certain aspects of class feminist approach, and certain aspects of the critical schools like Gramsci's school or Frankfurt school, social constructivist models, and then you can say in the end, we discussed this topic, that is the theory of complex interdependence. Today, there is no one theory which says that this is the only theory that works. Today, the nations are in a complex interdependence. What is this complex interdependence? We discussed a state of cooperation exists and a state of conflict exists. So there has to be an equal importance, or we have to study international relations from the perspective of each and every school as and when the time and space needs. So you can conclude the answer in that way. So this is a very good question. As far as this requires, again, this is a very dynamic point which requires our application. That is what I said. How has the development of global capitalism changed the nature of socialist economies and developing countries? Absolutely. From the Marxist perspective, that you can write the answer again, 15 marker. So every question is in the same way, and there is direct question, 15 marker. Explain the world systems approach as developed by Immanuel Wallerstein. We have discussed this in very detail, right? 15 marker. So I think even in 2017, there is some utility of the questions. If you look at 2016's question, there is one thing called critically examine the functional approach and systems approach to the study of international relations. You can write it because we have discussed about the functional approach. Who are the thinkers in functional approach? This is just 10 marker. You can write about David Mitrani, functional approach, and then you can counter David Mitrani, because David Mitrani is being very, very idealistic. Then neo-functionalism emerged. The propounder of neo-functionalism is Mr. Ernest Haas, and then he said that we have to be quite pragmatic, and we should also include politicians at some levels in order to resolve the conflicts at the global level. And then that is what functional in the systems approach. I said in the beginning of this class also, systems approach, yes, you can write world systems model, or systems approach again we can write in the perspective of system, that is every system, international order is seen as a system, and this is behavioral model, that is they are unlike the traditional approaches, they focus on scientific models. As a result, they have taken the inspiration from David Easton, and Martin Kepler is the person who has come up with systems approach, and Martin Kepler has said 8 classifications in his international politics. This Martin Kepler, I said I'll discuss further, but this is a question that is there. See this question again, the application oriented question. So I think you are getting the point, you are getting my point, what I wanted to say. Let us look at 2015 question paper. If you look at 2015 paper, this is 2015 paper that we are going to discuss, and this is the paper, Civil Services Mains 2015. We will look at the questions here. What are the questions that they asked? Direct questions we will see, because every question has we can link with the thinkers theory. See, there is one C for 10 marker. Identify the major difference between classical realism of Hans J. Morgenthau and neo-realism of Kenneth Waltz. Which approach is best suited for analyzing the international relations after the Cold War? After the Cold War, you can approach neither of these of the neo-liberalism approach, neo-realist approach of John Mayer Scheimer. In realist approach, you can say, because he has written a book called The Tragedy of Great Power Politics in 2001. Because Kenneth Waltz, I said in our discussion that he is Cold War thinker, Cold War theorist. But after the end of the Cold War, if there is one scholar who has given the perspective of realism in the international world order, then definitely it is the credit goes to Mr. John Mearsheimer, because of his book, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, which was written in the year 2001 after the end of the Cold War. There we have discussed this. So we can say that which is the best suited analysis for international relations, though both lacks or both has insufficient analysis. Rather, the best approach as far as realism is concerned, the offensive realism of John Mearsheimer. Again, you can say that both of them are not to such extent. You can also write from the perspective of the liberals here. How you can write from the perspective of liberals, for particularly from the perspective of Francis Fukuyama, who said that liberalism is the best method and realism is not the best method. Again, you can counter that argument by saying that John Mearsheimer already predicted that no theory has a hegemony in predicting the international world order, because every theory has a passing phase. And so 1990s or until 1990s to 2000 or 2000, though globalism has been emerged at the global level, but after 2010 we look at the deglobalization tendencies and the rise of the neo-realism as predicted by Mr. John Mearsheimer. So you can write your, or you can articulate your answer in this way. Is globalization essentially a process of universalization of capitalist modernity? Again, oh yes, this is universalization of capitalist modernity from the perspective of Marxists. But yes, if you want to say this, yes, it is true from the perspective of, you can use the perspective of Marxists, who said that globalism is the universalization of capitalism, or the highest stage of operation of capitalism. Or if you want to counter this argument, then definitely if you want to say no, then you can say that from the perspective of liberal institutions, where they say that globalization is not just a phenomenon of universalization of capitalist modernity. No, because this is just a tool to reduce inequalities as per the liberal perspective. So you can give both directions, and our answer should be from both perspectives. But in the end, again, we say that we accept with the Marxist approach, or because today we are looking at the deglobalization tendency. The reason being the inequalities, or the reason being the protectionist tendencies across the countries. So this is what the question is. So next we will look at one more question which was asked in this. See again, IMF, World Bank. There is one question. See, as far as that goes, the same approach I say. How is that economic and neoliberal or globalization is being interrogated from inside, even in the developed countries? What are the economic consequences? Again, the same questions, right? Just look quickly at the 2014, the last paper of today's discussion. Discuss the main factors that have contributed to the gradual transformation of the world from the billiard ball model to the cobweb model. If you remember my teachings or my discussions in the past videos, I have clearly said in my first video I discussed about the billion ball model, where this billion ball model was the Westphalian world order, and this cobweb model was the new world order, or the liberal world order, which was given by John Barton. John Burton has said that complex cobweb model, he has get this. Billiards model was the Westphalian world order. As per billion ball model, only state are the actors, right? This is what we discussed. As per cobweb model, it is not only the states, but the interaction has been at that point in the billiard model. The interaction was just between the states and states, but here every person in the state is going to have a relation with every other person. So as such, this is not just a simple cobweb. This is not just a simple billiard board model, but it is like a spider's web, where the ripples, if you touch one part, the ripples are going to be felt in the entire nation or entire globe. This is called the cobweb model. How, what is that thing which has made the globe to shift from here to here? Then definitely you can write what is that thing. Three things. One is the complex economic interdependence. Economic interdependency is one factor, and the sociological interdependence is the other factor. The rise of MNCs, the rise of other national actors in the international relations has played a very vital role, and people started the rise of communications, the rise of telecommunications, the rise of transport. This is what we discussed: communications, transport sector, the rise of transport, communications, the rise of people to people interactions, the rise of social interactions, business to business interactions. So these are the things which played a very crucial role from shifting to billiard ball model to cobweb model. So remember these names: John Curtin, Westphalian world order. So this is done. This is a 15 marker question. If you write these things and if you substantiate with what we are saying, then definitely it is going to work. I think you are getting the point. This is what the question is. See, this is again a question. Martin Kepler systems theory is contradictory to the fundamental precepts of systems approach. This I'll discuss when we are discussing this systems approach per se. What is this? Right? So this is 15 marker. We have to discuss this in detail. Feminist approach towards international politics is biased. We discussed feminist approach in international politics. Feminists like Cynthia Enloe, who said in her book The Bananas, the Beaches, and the Bases, what she said that the existing traditional schools like realism, Marxism, and liberalism, they are very gender biased, because they have kept women out of the international politics. But they say that during they say that women are the prime victims for the decisions which men are going to take at the national or international levels. Women are the victims both at the times of war as well as at the times of peace. At the times of war, they were very vulnerable towards their towards they were very vulnerable, as they become the refugees, and they become sexually exploiters. They get exploited sexually. During the times of peace also, women's issues are relegated to the background. As a result, if you look at the women's problems at the global level, like trafficking of women, it is definitely because of these mainstream theories like liberals, realists, and Marxists, because they kept the relations of international politics just to the war. And they considered that, what is their argument? these thinkers, they said that war is the only analysis that you have to do, and there are discourses at the international level that war is to the man like maternity is to a woman. So women as a discourse, there was a theme that was developed across the minds of the people, telling that women are not suitable for war. As a result, women were kept out of international politics. Feminists criticized the mainstream theories, and what they suggested, they said that the real cause of war is not the anarchy or anything. The real cause of war is men in the international politics. Why they say men? Because there is a popular discourse that men believe war make men and men make war. It is only wars through which men exercise their authority and wants to exercise their authority. As a result, it is the decisions of the men which is going to create war. So what is the solution that they offer? They offer the solution to include women in international relations, and women will think about peace more seriously than men. Why they think about peace more seriously than men? The reason is that they were more exploited than the men, because they were facing the grunt from the two levels, that is during the times of war and peace. So they can think about peace in a very better way than men. This was the arguments that was propounded by the feminist thinkers. However, they are asking it is biased, so we have to write the criticism of feminist approach. Again, we are not going to be saying that this is biased from my perspective or layman's perspective who will be discussing in some telegram channels, or someone who is discussing in Facebook. No, we will be not writing from their perspective. We will be writing from the perspective of thinkers. Again, thinkers like the liberal thinkers like Francis Fukuyama, they said they criticized women, saying that they lack or any scientific analysis, saying that if women were brought into the picture, or if women were brought at the helm of affairs, there is no conclusive evidence saying that it brings to peace. So this is just as a grudge against the women, against men, that these thinkers are propounding their model of international politics. That you can write from the perspective of the liberal thinkers. Realists also say that this is not particularly, if you look at the neo-realists like Kenneth Walls and John Mayer Schimmer, they didn't believe in the unit or in the human nature of war. They said that no, even it is man or woman, you will not look at the unit who is making the decisions. It is the structure of the international system which is responsible for the war. Hence, you cannot say that this is the only reason for war. So it is clearly biased. So you can say from that perspective. However, we can also say that we can support the feminist argument, saying that yes, women were right to some extent. Looking at the states like Rwanda, where women were given power, there are complete transformation of the society towards peace. You can say that some states were really where democracy is progressing because of women. You can counter that argument again from the perspective of feminism. So this is what the approach is. I think we are done with 2014. So if you look at all these questions, what is my takeaway? We are done with 2014 to 2020. So what is my takeaway from here? My takeaway from here is only one thing, that whatever we have discussed so far, the theories that we discussed in the past 9 lectures, it has certain utility. What is that utility? You can utilize these answers in every question. You can write in some other perspective. If you are very clear in these 9 lectures that we have taught in these theories, every question of paper 2 of PSIR, you can substantiate your answers. Substantiation can be very done beautifully. Every question I have shown in 2020 paper how we can substantiate each and every question. If you want to substantiate your answers, these theories are very important. Right? That is the importance of theories. That is why I have taken this much strain to complete the theories. And every question, it is section A and section B. You can use both sections, section A and section B. Even though section B is about India and its relations with other countries, then definitely here also you can use these substantiations. This is what the point is. You can substantiate. So the thing is, theories part a very important role, because if you want to understand paper 2, or if you want to write some answers about paper 2, paper 2 is very dynamic in nature as far as UPSC is considered. Very dynamic paper, and you will not have one source to write the answer. Like, the sources which are available in the market cannot be sustaining to your needs. So we have to develop conceptual understanding. We have to develop conceptual understanding, and we have to develop the application of the conceptual understanding. And this conceptual understanding has to be applied in paper 2. How we can apply? Like the theories thus I have shown. Every question, I am telling you again, I guarantee you, bring every question to me, any question from international paper 2, I can substantiate from these thinkers. Again, 1 point or 2 points we'll be writing about these theories or thinkers or these proponents who have made this theory. Then our answer will become more dynamic. That is the point. Otherwise, if you are not reading this, the entire preparation of paper 2 is going to be worthless. Again, I am telling you, it is going to be worthless. Because why it is worthless? You are not going to substantiate. We will be writing answers. I don't mean to say that you are not writing answers. You will be writing 20 out of 20 questions, but a very generalistic answer. You'll be writing from your perspective. I'll be writing from my perspective, Dhananjay Reddy's perspective. No, they are not asking from your perspective or my perspective. They are asking from the perspective of the theories. Until and unless you quote the theories, the paper 2 is not going to be done. I think it is very clear. That is what the topic is. And I think you have enjoyed how the discussion goes or how it is going on. So friends, except one theory, that is the systems theory of Martin Kepler, I am done with the so-called this UPSC syllabus of paper 2. Paper 2, topic 5 in section A. What is that topic 5? Approaches to the study of international relations. From tomorrow we will be reading the other topics like power and related issues. But so far, I think this is very useful. If you have not seen the videos, just watch the videos. It will be very helpful for understanding the syllabus and understanding our things. Once we are done with this, we will be moving to the second, that is key concepts in international relations. One is we have to understand. From tomorrow we will be reading key concepts. The moment you understand the theories and the moment you link it with key concepts, then definitely every other topics are related to this one only. Every other topic in paper 2, these are linked to these two only, this one and this one. So we will keep again a much required focus on the key concepts, and then we will be looking at the other topics. So this is what I wanted to tell. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Have a nice day. We'll be meeting very soon in the next video.